was 2:16 a.m. when the security monitor showed a hallway that doesn't exist on any blueprint of Waverly Hills Sanatorium. I'd worked overnight security for 6 months, long enough to memorize every sealed door, every dead camera, every place people say you shouldn't linger. But this feed, labeled East Wing, wasn't supposed to be active. The lights in that hallway pulsed slowly, like they were breathing. And then there was Screen 7. A pale hallway, longer than any corridor I'd walked. The overhead lights didn't hum like ours did. They pulsed, like they were breathing. And at the far end, a door with a sign I couldn't read at first because the camera was slightly out of focus. The timestamp in the corner said Cam 7, East Wing. But there was no East Wing, not anymore. Waverly Hills had been renovated twice since the fire 30 years ago. Everyone knew that story. A sealed wing, entire floors reworked, pieces of the old building swallowed by new construction like scar tissue. The old wing had been gutted after the incident. At least that's what orientation said. I leaned closer to the monitor, the chair squeaking too loud in the security room. The hallway on Screen 7 was empty. Then the camera flickered, one tiny hiccup, and suddenly someone stood halfway down the corridor. Not walking, just there. A figure, tall and thin, like a person stretched wrong. They wore something that might have been a hospital gown, but the fabric hung too long, dragging in a way that didn't match gravity. Their head tilted slightly, as if reading something on the floor. And they weren't facing the camera, they were facing the door at the end of the hall. I told myself it was a glitch, a looped feed from an old camera installed before the renovations. Maybe Screen 7 was mislabeled, maybe it was some storage closet camera or some maintenance corridor. But when I checked the camera list, the whole line for Cam 7 looked fresh, like it had been added today. No notes, no maintenance tags, no offline indicator, just East Wing. I got up to verify physically the way they trained us. If you see something unusual, confirm. Always confirm. My flashlight felt heavier than it should have. The radio on my shoulder hissed with the kind of quiet that makes you aware your own breathing is too loud. The hospital at night is a different animal. Lights dimmed, floors waxed to an unnatural shine, the smell of antiseptics settling into everything. There's this constant undertone of machines, but it's like they're working behind a wall you can't see. It's never truly silent, except that night, the silence seemed selective. I walked to the corridor where the East Wing used to branch off, the place everyone avoided without saying why. On the map in the break room, it was just a gray block labeled Restricted Access, like it wasn't even a place anymore. There was a door there now, solid, unmarked, fitted with a keypad. The walls around it didn't match the rest of the hallway. The paint was a shade too old, slightly yellowed. The air near it was cooler, as if the AC duct above that spot belonged to another building. My flashlight beam hit the keypad. No numbers, just a smooth panel with a faint smudge across it, like someone had tried to swipe their hand over it repeatedly. I radioed maintenance out of habit. No answer. I leaned in and listened. At first, nothing. Then, softly, like a conversation happening underwater, a beeping, the slow, spaced rhythm of a heart monitor. Beep, beep, beep. My stomach tightened. There weren't any machines behind that door, not anymore. I backed away and returned to the security room, suddenly aware I didn't want to turn my back to that door for too long, like the hallway itself had started paying attention. Screen 7 still showed the corridor. The figure was closer now. Not moving, just closer. As if the camera had zoomed in, but it hadn't. The figure was now near the end door, lifted one arm, jointed too smoothly, and touched the unreadable sign. Their fingers looked too long, too delicate, like they'd been made by someone who only understood hands from secondhand descriptions. The camera flickered again, and the figure was gone. I swallowed. My mouth tasted like copper, like my nerves were chewing on pennies. I did what any rational person would do. I called the charge nurse at the ICU. "Hey," I said, forcing my voice into something casual. "This is security. Do you guys have anyone wandering, any patient missing?" A pause. Then the nurse, Lena, laughed without humor. "You knew?" "Yeah, why?" "Because you don't say things like that in this building, not at night." I frowned. "Is someone missing?" "No, but if you saw something on camera, don't go chasing it into that blocked section. That wing is sealed." "I didn't say." "You don't have to," she replied. "Just turn that feed off if you can." The line clicked dead. I stared at my phone, then at the monitors. I tried to switch screen 7 to another camera. It wouldn't change. I tried minimizing it. It popped back up. I tried logging out. The system froze until I stopped trying. It was like the feed wanted to be watched. And then, on screen 7, the door at the end of the hallway began to open. Not fast, slowly, the kind of slow that feels deliberate. A sliver of darkness appeared in the crack. Not normal darkness. This looked thick, textured, like velvet folded into itself. A hand slid into view from inside. Not the figure's hand. This hand was wrong. Too pale, too clean, but the fingers bent the opposite way, like the joints were reversed. It curled around the edge of the door and held it open. And behind it, there was something standing in the doorway. Something that didn't fit the frame. It was too tall, too close to the ceiling. It didn't have a face, not in the human sense, just a smooth oval of skin where features should be. Except for one detail, a single indentation where eyes might have been. Not holes, just the suggestion of them. And it was angled slightly, as if it were listening. Then it turned, not toward the hallway, toward the camera, toward me. The screen distorted, static crawled like insects across the image. The lights in the corridor began to dim one by one, starting near the camera and traveling down the hall toward the door like a reverse sunrise. I should have looked away. I couldn't, because the thing on the screen raised its head and, without a mouth, somehow made me understand a message. Not in words, in a feeling. You're watching. That means you're here. Every monitor in the security room flickered. Screen 1, ER entrance, went black. Screen 2, pharmacy, went black. Screen 3, black. One by one, until only screen 7 remained. Only that corridor. Only that doorway. Only that thing. My radio crackled on my shoulder. Not voices. Breathing. Slow, steady breathing, like someone had pressed their lips to the mic. Then a whisper came through so faint I barely registered it. "Stay seated." I stood up immediately, chair scraping too loud. The whisper repeated, slightly clearer. "Stay seated." It wasn't a command. It sounded like a warning. Because as soon as I stepped away from the desk, I felt it, like the room behind me had become occupied. The air changed. It thickened, like someone had exhaled into the space and left their breath hanging. The security room was small, no windows, 2 doors, one to the hall, one to the utility closet. My flashlight sat on the desk. My hand wouldn't move right. My fingers tingled. My skin prickled in waves, the way it does when a thunderstorm is coming and your body knows before your mind does. I turned my head, slowly. Nothing. Just the closet door. I forced a laugh, a brittle, quiet sound. Then I saw it. a shadow under the closet door. Not the usual thin line. This was deep, solid, like someone was standing flush against the other side, blocking the light completely. And then the closet door handle began to turn. Not rattle, turn, smoothly. I backed up, my legs hitting the desk. My knee knocked the keyboard. Screen 7 flickered but stayed on. The closet door opened an inch, and through the crack, I saw a sliver of fabric, hospital gown material, dangling like someone was wearing it and standing just out of view. I heard something scrape lightly, as if bare feet were dragging over tile. Then the gown moved, not away from the crack, toward it, as if the thing was leaning forward to peek out. The door opened another inch. I saw skin, not pale like normal, pale like paper soaked in milk. And then I saw an eye. Just one. Too big, too glossy, as if it belonged to something that wasn't meant to be inside a skull. It stared at me through the crack, and behind it, deeper in the darkness, I saw more eyes, not attached to faces, just eyes, stacked, floating, watching. My throat closed. I couldn't scream. My mouth opened and all that came out was breath. The eye blinked slowly, and the whisper returned, not from the radio this time, but from inside the room, all around me, like the walls had learned to speak. Now you're on the right screen. Screen 7 changed without warning. No corridor, no door, just the security room. My security room. Filmed from above like a camera had been installed in the ceiling. And on that screen, I was standing at the desk, shaking, but behind me on the screen, there was a figure in a hospital gown, tall and stretched, head bowed. The one I'd seen earlier, only now it wasn't in the hallway, it was in the room, with me. I spun around. Nothing. I looked back at the screen. The figure lifted its head slowly, like it was finally acknowledging the camera, and where its face should have been, it was smooth, blank, except for 2 indents, and a third, and a fourth, more and more, as if the skin was trying to remember how many eyes a person is supposed to have. The closet door behind me opened wider. The air went ice cold, and then, softly, impossibly close, something leaned near my ear and breathed in. Not a sniff, a slow inhale, like it was tasting my fear. I didn't run. I didn't scream. I did the only thing my body would allow. I sat back down. The moment I did, the closet door stopped moving. The breathing stopped. The monitors all came back to life at once, like nothing had happened. Screen 7 returned to a normal camera feed, one that actually existed, a supply hallway with no sign of an east wing. I didn't tell anyone, not that night. I finished my shift with my hands folded tightly in my lap, eyes glued to the cameras, barely blinking. At 6 a.m., day security arrived. I signed out, walked to my car, and sat in the driver's seat for 20 minutes before I could breathe normally again. I told myself it was stress, a glitch, a prank. Then, later that week, I went into the break room and looked at the printed hospital map. The gray block labeled Restricted Access was gone. In its place, a clean white section with a label that hadn't been there before, East Wing, Observation, and beneath it, in smaller letters, Monitored. I never worked nights again, but sometimes when I'm up too late and my phone screen reflects my face back at me, I catch myself wondering, what would have happened if I hadn't sat back down?